Here is my progress so far on this very pretty paint by numbers that I call Stone Village. Now I know it isn't really a village, but I started calling it that in my head and the name just stuck. As you can see, I have already spent many hours on this painting. I cannot wait to fill in the rest and see it finished. This is all you need to paint. A canvas, paint and brushes that all come in the kit, a cup of water, some tissue or kitchen roll, and a surface to work on, in my case, my kitchen table. So let's jump into the time lapse, starting here. I'm sorry, I promise my head will disappear in about 30 seconds and will stay disappeared for the rest of the video. Now, one of the reasons I decided to fill in all the background and foreground, leaving the structures to last, is because two of the colours in the house looked almost identical shades of black, and I wasn't sure if I would have to lighten one up a little or leave them as they were and potentially lose some of the detail, especially in the roof. Just before recording this, I tested both colours side by side on a scrap of canvas, which maybe I should have done at the beginning, and there was a slight but visible difference, so I didn't need to alter the paint after all. That's one of the things I love about paint by numbers. If you're not happy with something, usually you can change it, and it's your painting, so why wouldn't you? Often there are several colours that are very close together. I always wait until the end to alter colours. I find it much easier to see what works when the rest of the painting is done, and I'm more likely to work through any issues when I've already spent hours and hours on a painting. It's the same with detail. If there's detail missing from the painting that was in the original picture, I will finish the painting, take a step back from it and see how it looks before I try to add anything. The other reason I left the structures to last was because I had already done the sky and trees behind the buildings before I had the idea to make this channel, and I had no way of recording painting. So I had to buy an overhead phone arm. I ordered it online, but I already knew I would not be able to stop painting while I waited on delivery. And I thought it would be nice to leave those parts for the video. The arm actually took ages to come. I think it was lost by the courier, then found. Then they said it was delivered, and it wasn't. It was a whole palaver, but divine timing is divine timing. And by the time it actually arrived, I'd finished all the other details, then spent days going over and over it to cover the numbers. If the arm had come sooner, I might not have given the painting quite that much devotion, and it probably wouldn't look as good as it does. I did go over the house, the bridge and the church several times too, but it didn't seem like as much of a task as it would have if I still had the whole canvas to go over. I bought this painting from Amazon. It's by a company called Tishiron. I know they still sell kits. There are loads to choose from, but I can't find this one anymore. It may be discontinued, so there's no link in the description, but I did buy it almost a year ago. If you happen to find it, feel free to mention it in the comments, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend anybody buy this kit because of the trouble I had covering the numbers. I do love the way it's come out, but I am beyond thankful that it's done. When I buy paintings, there are a whole load of different reasons behind the pictures I pick. Sometimes I just absolutely love it. Other times it's the way a picture makes me feel. Sometimes there's an effect I want to try, or the advertised picture is photo quality and I want to see how well the painting will come out in real life. The reason I bought this one, however, was the detail. In the advertised picture, it looked so detailed, I really didn't believe it would be in real life. I was wrong. This painting is phenomenally detailed and so far is looking really close to the original picture. Many times it's close to the picture, but generally missing details, usually the ones that sold you on the picture in the first place. So it's very nice when you get one that is pretty much exactly as it should be. Now, the design on this canvas is printed in red ink rather than the usual grey. Red is, in my experience, by far the easiest colour to cover. But I find that as every line has two colours meeting on it, even dark print is easy to cover when it comes to the design. This is not the case with numbers. Never have I ever had so much trouble covering numbers. Usually with a paint by numbers, the hardest number to cover are the light ones, creams, greys, white. Yellow is also one of the worst, but even the darker colours were not covering the numbers on this properly. Now, sometimes I go over the canvas with a watered down coat of white gesso before I start, which helps cover the print a lot, but it can make it hard to read the numbers. Not the design, somehow that is always clear. Most paint by numbers come with a paper chart, so it's not a problem if I lose numbers on the canvas, as I can refer to the chart to make sure I'm using the right paint. If there's no chart, I take a photo on my phone and it works just as well. Although now I'm using my phone to record, I'll need to think of something else to work from. I know I have 2 kits that came with no chart, and one is printed so dark I'm not even sure black paint will cover it, but that is a problem for later next year. I know the next 4 paintings that I'm going to do, and that is not one of them. I did not use gesso on this one as there was so much detail and it was so small. I thought there was a good chance I would lose some of the design, and referring to the paper chart for every single number would be far too confusing and way too time consuming, as the chart is much smaller than the painting itself. Originally, I was going to blind the sky. It was the only part of this painting that didn't have a lot of detail, but somehow the company that made it thought it would be an excellent idea to print the number 9 to 13 times in each area of the sky. You only need the number once. Anyone who's doing a paint by numbers with this level of detail does not need the number printed more than once, especially when there's a chart to refer to. So that resulted in multiple coats of paint for the sky, and as the colour darkened slightly with every coat, it no longer matches the shade in the paint pots. So I thought it was better just to leave it as it is. And don't get me started on the big black code on the bottom edge of the canvas. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with that. And yes, I know no one's going to see it once the painting's on the wall, but it still irritates me that it is there at all. The paints with this kit are acrylics, but strangely, 2 of the colours do not behave like acrylics. They were more like oil paints, but were very fast drying, so definitely not true oil paints. And these were both shades of dark yellow and took the most coats of paint to cover by far, because they didn't go on as solid block colours like acrylics, and despite the pigment looking really dark and rich in the pot, they were almost transparent when applied to the canvas. I have never come across that in a paint by numbers kit before. So this entire painting has been done 3 times over at least, and some colours have been gone over 6 to 8 times. I only record the first coat. I fill in the others off camera. It's one thing to watch a time lapse where you can see a painting come to life, but a second coat is so subtle a change, it's not going to show up on camera. And because I paint at my kitchen table, I can't leave my recording arm set up for more than a few hours at a time. If I paint in the afternoon, it has to be taken down for tea, then I can set it back up till bedtime, and it needs to be taken down for breakfast and all sorts of other things we use the table for. So if I've a spare 10 minutes and the table is free, I will whip out my painting and do some double coating without setting up the arm, which I can never get back in the same position. That's why the time lapse is zoomed in and jumps around a little bit. I sit very close to the canvas when I'm painting, and if I have the arm set up as high as it will go, it still needs to be set at an angle for the camera to take in the whole picture, and it would be harder to keep my head out of the way. Either my pictures are too big or my arm is too short. I have considered putting a shelf up in the kitchen above the table to attach the arm to in the future, but I think I prefer the zoomed in recording, as it means you only get to see parts of the painting being completed, but not the whole picture until it's finished. I paint at the table because I have nowhere else to do it. I don't have an easel or anywhere I could leave one set up, even if I did. And to use an easel, I would need to frame the canvas before painting, which I have never done, and I'm not sure I could stand and paint for the same length of time I can sit and paint, which is hours, and that's just as well because roughly 30 seconds of time lapse is around about an hour and a half in real time, so that gives you some idea of the hours that have gone into what you're watching right now. When it comes to brushes, normally you get 3 with each kit, a very small one, a slightly bigger one and a medium one. They are cheap and can lose quite a few bristles, but I find they do tend to last the whole painting if you take care of them. And by taking care of them, I mean rinse often. The paint is so fast drying, even if you're not changing colour, you do need to keep rinsing. Then dry the brush on kitchen roller tissue. I tend to use the very small brush, and I've gone whole paintings without using the slightly bigger one and only using the biggest one on the larger areas, mostly skies and backgrounds, but that's just my own personal preference. Before I start a painting, I check the thickness of the paints. They can be really quite thick and I am not a fan. I find it hard to work with in small areas and it takes longer to cover large areas and you use a lot more than maybe you need to. So I thin them out before I start painting. To do this, I add water and give it a stir. I only add a couple of drops of water at a time, and if I make it too thin, I just leave the pot open for a wee while as they do thicken up again. I can thin the paint several times during one painting. The paint pots are so small, I am not sure there would be enough to do the whole painting if I didn't add water. It is nothing short of a miracle that I didn't run out of paint while doing this one, considering how many coats it's had. I have been thinning paints since I started painting by numbers, so that is not the reason these numbers have been so hard to cover. I've never had such a problem before, and I never want to have it again, but I do have 2 more kits, possibly 3, that are by Tishiron, so I may be in for some disappointment. But there is hope. A video popped up on my YouTube feed the other day of a woman who claims to have invented a way to remove numbers without damaging the canvas. It worked in the video, but I am going to order a couple of things so I can try it for myself. I will keep you posted. Now, it's an amazing thing if it works, but not very practical for a whole painting. It would be very time consuming on a painting like this. I think having seen the process that multiple coats of paint would be quicker to do, but it would be brilliant for backgrounds, skies and the colour white. Oh, and big black coats. Another thing I'm going to try is clear gesso instead of white to coat the paintings before starting. I didn't even know there was such a thing, and it sounds like a pointless exercise, but it might actually be better than white. Something to do with the surface it leaves once it's dried means nothing is supposed to show through the paint. If not nothing, then very little. And if it's as good as that, it will be far quicker than trying to erase numbers one at a time and should not obscure the numbers on the canvas the way that the white gesso does. Now, a couple of tips before we jump to framing. If you're buying paint by numbers, pay attention to what you're buying. Make sure you're not buying diamond art. It really irritates me that so many diamond art kits have paint by numbers / cross stitch / embroidery in the descriptions. I have nothing against diamond art. It's not for me, though I've done a couple in the past, but if I wanted diamond art, I would look for diamond art. If I wanted a painting, I do not want to be fooled into buying diamond art by misleading sellers. Always read the full description. And some paint by numbers come with a frame option. Again, pay attention to the description because some come framed and some come with frame. If you don't want to try framing for yourself, make sure the painting you're buying really does come framed. If it comes with frame, you will be in for a disappointment, as that means the frame will be included in the kit, but you'll have to assemble it yourself and attach the canvas, like I am just about to. Now that this stunning thing is finally finished. Well, almost. Now, I have to say I'm very pleased with this. I really didn't think it would look this good. It's half a bonny. And welcome to my living room floor where I do my framing. I don't work directly on the floor, hence the plywood. The towel is just to protect the painting. There it goes. And the frame is already assembled. I have my tools, my staple gun, canvas stretchers and my wee box of screwdrivers. I haven't noticed yet, but 2 of my most important tools are actually missing. Now, I have penciled in dots on the back of the painting, marking the corners of the design so I have a rough idea where to line up the frame when the painting is face down. Drawing on the dots is something I do before I start painting, just in case I forget later. It's not a problem with this one, but I've done a couple that have dark backgrounds and I just go right ahead and paint to the edges of the canvas instead of to the edge of the design area. The marks are most helpful on those, but it's just a habit I've got into. Mark the back of the painting first, as the border around the picture is not always even all the way around. Even with the marks, getting the positioning right is the trickiest bit for me. Because of the detail in this painting, I want the bottom of the picture as close to the bottom of the frame as I can get it. I buy my stretcher bars from eBay, and here in the UK they are measured in inches. The painting, however, is measured in centimetres, so the painting is slightly smaller than the frame, which means that I have some leeway with the framing. Just so you know, I am not a professional in any way, shape or form. The first time I framed a painting, I watched a couple of videos on YouTube and gave it a go. It came out pretty good and I've been doing my own ever since. I always start with one staple at the top and one at the bottom. So if I've not got the position right, it's easy to start over. And you can see I'm putting a fair bit of tension on the canvas by the way that it lifts down the middle. And I am not happy with that, so I'm going to start over. So out come the staples. I have a wee flathead screwdriver I used to bring the staple out of the frame enough to grip it with the pliers. And this is when I notice my pliers are missing. And go right ahead and use my fingers to pull out the staples, which, by the way, I do not recommend. I keep all my painting and framing tools in one drawer, and when things are missing, it usually means my man has borrowed them and forgot to put them back. He was at work at the time, so improvising was much quicker than going on a tool hunt, as they were most likely out in his shed, and to look for anything out there, you will need a torch, a map, and about 3 days worth of snacks. Now, the reason I want the bottom of the painting as close to the bottom of the frame as possible is because it's so much easier and quicker to extend the sky than all the detail on the bottom. The sides are both as detailed as each other, so I'm not too fussed about them. As long as they're straight, I'm happy. It would be nice if the canvas around the painting was left a little larger. This one isn't too bad, but I have some have a narrower border and can be difficult to pull by hand, which is where the stretchers come in, but mostly I work better with my bare hands. I find it easier to get the tension right. So I don't use the stretchers to tension this painting, but it's a good thing I brought them because I do use them to tap in the staples later when I realise my hammer is also missing. That is the position I want. So now I need to put the same tension on the sides. You can see how much tension is on the canvas by the way that it behaves. I want that pulled effect between my first staples to move to the corners as I staple the first side. And then to the centre when I fix down the last side, just like that. Now I know my tension is good, my position is good, and we can speed this up. I still find the corners quite tricky. I don't do them quite like I should. I think the term for the proper corners is hospital corners, but when I try to do mine that way, they end up quite pookit. I'm not sure if it's a me problem or the canvas is too short problem, as all the videos I watched for framing were of artists who cut their own canvas and they gave themselves nice big borders to pull on. That being said, my corners do improve with every painting, but I will show you mine close up once it's finished. And voila, it is done. Now I'm just putting on masking tape. I just put it over the staples. It looks a little bit tidier. I might get brown tape to hide them completely. But all I have left to do is paint in the edges and attach the hanging fixings and the string. I have applied masking tape all around the sides of the painting, so I don't have to be too careful at the edges. I can paint quickly and a little bit messily, and there's something strangely satisfying about pulling off the masking tape at the end and revealing a perfect edge underneath. I'm just extending whichever colour is at the edge of the canvas and filling in the gaps as best I can, so it will look as if it was always part of the picture. Again, this had many coats of paint. The hardest part was the little path down from the house, but I filled it in pretty well. After this, I did paint around the sides with white many, many times. That hideous black coat would not cover, as you will see in just a moment, but overall, I don't think this could have come out any better than it has. So here is the finished painting. I am so happy that this one is done. I am so happy that I am never going to have to take another paintbrush to this thing again. But I'm also so happy with how it's come out, because this was the picture that came with the painting in the very first place. And I don't think it could have gotten much closer to the painting in real life. I wish all paint by numbers would be like this. Sadly, that is not the case. Now, this still irritates me a little bit. I can't get it to cover completely. Once the painting's on the wall, you're never going to see it. Also, this is how I do my corners. They are getting closer and closer to the top where they're supposed to be. So hopefully with a bit more time and experience, I will have gotten there. The only thing I have left to do is attach the string. And this one will be stored away, waiting on raffle day. Now, if you want to help me get there that much faster, and you would like this to be hanging in your house, like, share, subscribe. The quicker the channel grows, the sooner we'll get to a raffle. Thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye the now.